Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel, and today we're going to be looking at a very important Java question which some people seems to struggle with when they get to interviews. And a lot of times uh, it's just simple understanding of how objects work and how to compare them. And the questions deals with equals method versus using the double equal operator when dealing with objects. um, so let's look at this diagram. As you can see from the top, I'm creating two instances, or I'm creating two strings, st1 mic and st2 mic. And what happened is that when you create the st1 mic, Java create a memory address, and this time I'm giving a random number 2424, and it's gonna save mic in the memory. And what happened is that st1 is gonna hold a reference to that address. Then you have another st2 mic, and what Java is going to do is going to check in the memory and see, okay, I have mic, so it's going to take the reference for that mic string and it's going to store it in st2. So when you try to do st1 using the compare them using the equal operator, what is happening is checking for the memory, and it's saying, okay, is st1 and st2 referencing the same memory? And if they are equal, is yes. If they're not, it's going to say false. On the other side, if you're trying to create two instances of student, let's say you have a class student and you create st1, which is new student, and it holds mic and the age 25. In the memory, you create the reference and for the memory, and you store that in st1. So you have, in the memory you have this address, and you're storing mic and his age. If you create another instance of student, and this time you have John 36, you're going to create a different memory, and this time it's going to have a different reference, and you have John and 36, st2 43, 46. So if you try to use the equals method, not equals method, if you try to use the equals operator, this is going to come here and check, okay, is st1 storing a reference to some memory? Yes. How about the other one? Are they sharing the memory? No. So this is going to be wrong. If you try to use st1 and use the equals method, so out of the box, and what I mean by out of the box, the way Java is, if you extending the object class of Java in Java programming, equals method is already provided for you. And if you try to use equals method just the way it is using this kind of flow of doing st1 dot equals st2, is they're comparing the same context. They're trying to look for the memory. However, that's not how you wanna capitalize on using equals method, and that's what we're gonna be looking tonight. So when you go to interviews and they ask you, can you explain to us how to use a doubles operator versus equals when comparing method? The tricky part is they want to understand. They want to see if you understand is the concept of that. Yes, it's provided, but it doesn't solve the problem just the way it is. So by default, like I said, out of the box implementation, equals method checks the object reference of two objects to verify their equality. And the way it's defined, basically two objects are equal if and only if they belong, or rather stored in the same memory address according to shadow comparison. So when you're doing equals method out of the box, you're doing shadow comparison. And what is shadow comparison? Shadow comparison is the moment you try to use equals operators, and that's not what you want to capitalize on. On the other hand, if you implement or you use equals method the right way, you're going to be doing something called deep comparison. And this is a kind of comparison that you want to achieve with your equals method through overriding it, because the basics of using equals method the right way is to evaluate the content and the value. So if we go back here and using the equals method right way, let's say you have mic 25 in this memory and you have mic 25 in this memory, and you try to do equals, it should be true because these are two objects that share have the same content. This mic is his mic, his 25, his mic is 25, his mic. So that's the best usage of using equals method. So I got my IntelliJ here, and I'm gonna create a Java method here. Student. and I'm saying private int age, I'm saying private string name. And what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna create getters and setters and delete getters and setters. So this is just a regular module, and I need a constructor for your object. Need a constructor with all the variables. So you have this class, and you have age, name, and you have getters and setters and constructor. So then, within the same package, I'm gonna create my main class, not my main class, the class that's gonna hold the main class, so that we can be able to do our testing. And this class is gonna have a main method. So right now, the way Java, the way this student is, if I create student st1 and say is equals to new student, and you want age is 23, and name of Mike. This is going to be a string, so you want Mike. So you have an instance of Mike. So if you try to do student, and you say st1 is equals to new student, and no, age is 23, the string is, his name is Mike. So it's gonna be st2. So right now, these are two objects. These objects have the same content. Right now, if you go here, we don't have any equals method. So this is what I'm calling out of the box. If I try to come here and try to print out, if I try to print out st1 is equals to st1 is equals to equals method, and I'm trying to compare st2, yeah, did a mistake here, I need to correct that. So right now, let's print this out and see what happened. So we're gonna run this, and you're gonna see the the console. So if you look at this, if you're trying to do st1 dot equals st2, it's gonna give you false, because right now it's trying to see if these two reference the same thing. Remember what we looked in on one of our slides, and in this slide we say that okay, if we had two Mike and they don't share the same reference, this is gonna be wrong. So basically what we're doing right now, because it's out of the box, is like we are doing st1 is equals to st2, and that's not what we're trying to do. We're trying to compare the content. So this is basically like doing st1 is equals to st2. So these two are the same right now, because you're trying to compare the content of these two. If you changed these, let's say you come here down and you create student. So you create student st3 is equals, you say st2. So basically what you're saying is that these two are pointing to the same thing. If you had to print and say st1, no, st3 is equals to st2, let's see what happened, because now you're trying to compare reference. So you see these two here, they are comparing st1 to st2, st1 to st2, because they don't point to the same reference. Is saying false. But if you see st3 is storing the reference of st2, so it's basically like, you know, in our diagram here, it's like you have st2 here with 4342 and you have st3 here with 4342 at the same time. So basically those two are pointing to the same reference. So, and that's what is happening. So this equals method right now is acting like these two equal operator, and that's why I did this demo here, so that you can see what I mean when both of them have this they are referencing to the reference memory. So the way to achieve your the way you achieve your optimal result of using equals method is doing deep comparison, and this is the kind of comparison you want to achieve from your equals method, and this is achievable through overriding equals method. So the key thing is override, because you already have it in your class object hierarchy. What do I mean by that? If you look at this diagram, so this is the hierarchy. At the top of the Java object class, you have object class, and anybody, you know, in simple terms, is inheritance. Anybody who, you know, implement or extend this class is gonna inherit all the methods that come with this. So we are here in the class. Other objects that inherit stuff from object is boolean, systems, number. String is famous because it uses equals a lot to compare, thread, and math. So if you create your public class student, you're gonna get all the behaviors of object, and that's what we have right now out of the box. We haven't done anything in terms of implementing or using string. We just get it just by creating this class here, because we are creating class object. We get this behavior from the parent class. This is the parent class. So once we implement here, we get all the behavior. So for us to be able to optimize equals method, we come here and what we're gonna do, just use our, you know, you can just write it by yourself, but you know, you still can use the IDE, and IDE is gonna help you. See next, finish. So right now, let's remove hash code. We're gonna talk about that in another tutorial. So right now, you have equals method, and when you override it, what you're trying to do, you're trying to make sure that when you're doing your comparison, you're doing deep comparison. And basically, what deep comparison does is compare the content. And the first thing you're trying to do here is you're trying to check if these two objects you're dealing with, they are referenced. So this one is saying, you know, if st1 and st2, they are like the same reference. Let's say, for example, you are using st1 here, st3, and this. If they are the same, don't even do everything else. Return true, because if two objects share the same memory, they're the same object. And then the other thing that you're checking here is this second object an instance of student? So this is a student that we are creating everything from student, and you're saying when you're comparing st1 and st2, I want to make sure that st2 is still an instance of student, because if it's not, there's no need to compare. For example, let's say we had another class called computer. I mean, there's no need to waste time trying to compare two. You already know. Even the compiler is telling you, oh, those two are not compatible because they're instance of different classes. So you know, you don't need to waste your time comparing comparing objects that are not from the same instance. And once you do that, the other thing that you're trying to do is this class that you have, because this class is from the origin of the hierarchy, you're trying to downcast it to the student. So here you're doing the downcasting, and then finally what you're trying to say is I want you to return these are boolean. You either get a true or false. So you say you get the age from the first class, which is this, and you compare the content of the age, and then you come back here and you compare the name. So this equals, the way it's constructed here, some people get confused. This one is just like the way people do assertions when you're writing your test. You know how you write assert that, and when you're doing this assert method, basically what happened is that you pass two variables, or you pass two values that you're trying to compare. You have the first value and you have the second value, and basically what you're trying to say is that this value probably is what you're returning from the method you're testing, and then you pass a value here and you're saying, hey, is this true or not? Are these values the same? So basically that's what you're trying to do with these objects dot equals. You're telling it object dot equals, and you're checking these two objects if they are the same, the name from your this method and the name from the other object. So you're taking this and you're comparing with the other object, and you want to return if they are true. So if we remove this right now and try to run this, so I want you to see the difference now, what we had before and what we have right now. Boom, it's true. So basically what equals is saying, I did not compare the reference, I compared the content. Like we said, when you're doing the deep comparison, is this the kind of comparison you want to achieve from your equals method, and basically it's achievable through overriding equals method. And what this does, the deep comparison, it compare the content, and that's what we saw from here. After verifying everything here, of going through this process here, it comes down here and check the age and compare everything. So let's say for example your student, the other thing, the way you can optimize this, let's say for example you had a student that had an integer or let's say an ID, and this ID is unique, it will never change, or you'll never have two students have this different ID, or this student have different IDs, they'll never have similar IDs. You can just do that. You don't have to do everything we are doing here. You can just come here and say, okay, after you verify everything here, just check if the IDs are the same. If they are the same, if they equals, then it's true. If they are not, just tell me false. And that's how you do it. It's simple as that. You override it, and once you override it, you optimize it, and you get the optimal result, because you don't want to have two objects comparing reference, and a lot of people fail that. So then the trick is, during interview they'll try to see if you can be able to reason this. If you don't know the reason behind using this equals method is in the power of overriding it, then they're gonna see, oh, this guy or this lady doesn't understand what the power of equals or what the purpose of this. And these are basic Java question, but if you don't understand it, you're not going to be able to work with application. Because let's say for example in the real world, you're trying to you receive a JSON file or a JSON object, and you're trying to compare if this mic in the database is the same mic you received today before you do anything. So those two objects you have to be able to compare, and you're not going to be comparing their reference, you're going to be comparing the content. And the other thing that comes up a lot, that I'm going to be talking in my next tutorial, is what's the relationship between hash code and equals. Because you can still go to a further step and override hash code, because like I said, out of the box you get it. And when you optimize that, you make sure that the way you're achieving your equals method, your hash code will always be unique. Because hashing is interesting. You can have two objects that have the same hash code, but if you optimize, or you do you design your equals method the right way, your hash code will be unique between objects. One object, if they're different, they have different hash code. If they have the same content, they have the same hash code. And that's a contract. So just to prepare you for the next the next tutorial that I'm going to be doing, we're going to be talking about hash code and see how the contract goes. But basically, the underlying idea is if two objects are equal according to the equals method, then calling the hash code method on each of the two objects must produce the same integer results. And this is the key here. This is where the tricky part is. The programmer should be aware that producing distinct integer result for an equal object may improve the performance. So basically they're saying that be aware that you can have two different objects with the same hash code. So if you design your equals method the best way, you're gonna get a distinct hash code between different objects. So always design your equals method such that it always produce different hash code for objects with different content. So that's what we're going to be looking at in my next tutorial, and hopefully you are able to understand what I talked about today. And the next time you get an interview, you're going to be able to answer this question the right way, and without any problem, and you're going to be able to ace that interview and get your job. So please don't forget to subscribe and like this tutorial and share, and hopefully see you next time. Thank you.